Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's Urbis Dialogue. My name is Luisa Weiss from the ICLEI World Secretariat, and I would like to give you a short technical introduction so you know how we will use the webinar system. For the duration of the presentations that you will listen to now shortly, you will be muted. But we are very happy to receive your questions, input, and feedback to these presentations. You can do so by writing your input and questions into the question box in front of you. At the end of the webinar, we will have a question and answer session and are then very happy to get back to your questions. Also, if you have any technical problems, please feel free to type them into the question box, and I will be happy to assist you. I hope you will enjoy this webinar with us.
Welcome to the Urbis Dialogues Webinar 7. My name is Georgina Avlanitis, and I'm from ICLEI City's Biodiversity Center. Today's webinar, curated by Jose Puppim de Oliveira, visiting scholar at MIT-UTM Malaysia Sustainable Cities Program, is titled Ecosystem Services Part 2, Transferring Knowledge into Useful Action and Policy. The webinar is brought to you by the Urban Biosphere Initiative, or Urbis. Urbis is a global network connecting acclaimed scientific researchers, foresighted policymakers, visionary planners, and environmental practitioners from across the world, partnering with local governments to share, develop, and implement ideas for creating more resilient and equitable urban regions. Our advisory board and partners are shown on the screen now. Please go to the Urbis website shown in the bottom left to see more about Urbis and the whole 15-month series of dialogues. The Urbis Dialogues are a 15-webinar series, a global platform for online dialogue held the first Thursday of every month and archived for repeated viewing. They bring together representatives of cities and local governments, leading experts from around the world, sharing experiences and addressing specific urban challenges, focusing on the sustainable use of regional biodiversity and ecosystem services to support social development in a rapidly urbanizing world. Please note that the next Urbis Dialogue will be led by Harini Nagemba on the 3rd of December, titled The Urban Commons, the many ways in which nature in the city serves as a common resource, not just a private, state, or public good. Today's webinar is curated by Jose Puppim de Oliveira and is titled Ecosystem Services, Transferring Knowledge into Useful Action and Policy, with two expert speakers, Pearsell and Tatiana Gadda. We welcome questions, so please use the questions feature in the control panel of your screen. Let's start by introducing Jose. Jose is currently an MIT-UTM visiting scholar. He's also associated as visiting researcher at the United Nations University and visiting research professor at the Getulio Vargas Foundation and Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. His work is multi- and interdisciplinary, involving applied social science and their link with the natural and health sciences and engineering. His academic expertise cuts across different fields, including urban studies, planning, environmental policy, development studies, business and society, and public administration. His research and policy interests concentrate broadly in the area of political economy of sustainable development. He is particularly interested in patterns of governance, institution building, and policy implementation at different levels, looking at how global institutions are interlinked to local governments and action, and vice versa. Over to you, Jose.
Okay, thank you, Gina. Hello, everyone around the world that are attending the webinar, the 7th webinar in the series of 15. I'm glad to be here for the second time, and today you're going to talk about the ecosystem service, transferring knowledge in use of action and policy. I'll be talking for around 10-15 minutes, and then I also have two colleagues from Edmonton in Canada and Curitiba, where they are going to share the experiences concerning this topic, as well as show a little bit what the cities are doing in terms of ecosystem service, in how they learn, how they include those ecosystem services in the policy process. Just to start my talk, just show that what came out in this journal called Lancet. It's the main journal in the area of health, particularly public health, and it showed that it's called planetary health, exactly because it tries to make the link between health and the health of the planet. And what see initially, the health of the human population has improved in the last decades. But the main concern they show is exactly that this may not go like this in the future, because this improvement in human health has been a trade-off between the improvement in human health and the planetary health. And what they concluded is, if you don't change the path of development, all the improvements in the health we have had in the last decades may be undermined in the future with the climate change, with the loss in biodiversity, and other environmental problems at different scales. And cities are in the heart of the discussions, exactly because the influence of cities concerning, for example, biodiversity, climate change, and also vice versa, how loss in biodiversity, also climatic change affect cities in different levels. And in cities, particularly large cities, they have an impact much larger than the impact in only the local, where the broader the cities, but also region, because a lot of the cities, they depend on water, other resources come from just outside the city, but also impact in terms of waste and other disturbance they cause in the environment outside the boundaries of the city. But more and more we are trying to understand now also the impacts, the global impacts of cities in far away, and also how these global changes are in fact impacted our cities. And also recently you saw the development of Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure how many of you have been reading the newspapers, but it appeared that the UN just released those goals, are 17 goals. And for the first time, there is a specific goal on cities at the global level. That is the goal number 11, that makes cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Exactly, if you read carefully this goal, you see there are a lot of discussions that cities they have a lot of problems that need to be solved, that concern locally, but also if they don't solve the impacts of the city at the global scale, these impacts may reverse in the long term, impact the cities themselves, and how you actually make a balance between what's better in terms of improvements of life of citizens, as well as how we can make sure that those impacts don't undermine the health of the planet. And when you look at opportunities, and this is a study when I was in UN University, we did UNDP, looking at the opportunities for those changes. Particularly when you look at infrastructure, this year we estimate around $10 trillion being invested in infrastructure. A large part of these infrastructure in cities. If you try to innovate and make things different in the way you invest a large part of these 10 trillions, you could make huge difference, not only in terms of the health of our population as well, but also in terms of how we impact the global environment, and how you take these opportunities in the medium and long term, particularly in those areas that are urbanized rapidly now in parts of Africa, India, that they follow a different path from the path that many cities in other parts of the world follow, that they don't improve the health of their inhabitants, at the same time they may impact the global environment. How to make this development that you can have this win-win situation between local and global. And the local governments or subnational, they have importance on this because they control areas and sectors that crucially affect biodiversity, impact human quality of life, for example, land use, land and housing. And also, in fact, in many countries, they are responsible for implement a lot of policies, national policy, international policies at local level. They also, those governments, they closer to their constituencies, and they have a lot of flexibility to implement new policies, and they become kind of a laboratory for creative policies. At the same time, biodiversity brings ecosystem services for the local population, and the local governments can make sure that those services are there all the time. Just to give an example, a very important service, for example, water. Many cities around the world are suffering with the water resources because of climate change, but also changes in the local environment that affect the supply of water. And this is how we make sure that these local governments are engaged. And those ecosystem service, biodiversity is a key component because it's make a linkage between those ecosystems and make them function. If you don't have the preservation of biodiversity in different scales, those ecosystems may have problem in functioning, deliver some of the service they are supposed to provide. And less directly also, many of these ecosystems, even though the cities don't occupy a large part of the land, but they, as I mentioned, a lot of things that you depend in the activity in the city comes from far away, and it is the ecosystem far away. If they also get not functioning well, it may affect the health of the city as well. But at the same time, there are many obstacles, and you're going to discuss these with the two cities today, why many local administrations are not engaged in preserving biodiversity, but at the same time providing the ecosystems, the service that could be acquired from this biodiversity. As these have many listed there, local administrations, they lack autonomy to do a lot of things that affect biodiversity, but at the same time, it is important that the policy process, maybe biodiversity are not that important. They have many other priorities at local level, and you don't see biodiversity as important, even though, as I mentioned, a lot of important services in the cities require the conservation of biodiversity. Also, many of them, they don't have the institutional capacity to be looking here how they build this institutional capacity to implement these actions, for example, climate change, biodiversity. Also, there is this argument that is in many governments, why are we going to do this if the others are not doing, and in the end, you know, this is a global public good, like biodiversity and climate stability, that if they don't do themselves, if they do themselves but the others don't do, in the end they were going to have the same results. And then a lot of people say, why you should be doing this if the others are not doing? And also, finally, the coordination actions at national, regional level that may be more effective. And they say, why are you doing this? Should be the role of the state government or the role of national government. Why we should be engaged in those kinds of activities. And it's really a question sometimes of these like political interests, just financial, sometimes the resources are there, or sometimes the institutional capabilities. They want to do, but they don't have the capability to do that. And during the webinar, you're trying to point out also, I'd like very much to get the attendees to bring a little bit of their experiences, how they overcome some of those obstacles, like political interest, financial, and institutional capabilities. But more and more, we're seeing that in the other side that a lot of those governments are engaged. Sometimes these progressive politicians in power, or a lot of those governments anticipate future national policies. There are a lot of win-win situations at local level with biodiversity, for example, preservation, and also more and more see these local authorities with national governments trying to gain legitimacy to shape regional, national, international debates about biodiversity, and as well as promote their image as a city that innovates. And now discussions and the main questions I would like to bring to you: how to strengthen this policy process, the capabilities locally for biodiversity ecosystem services can be improved, and what is the role also of knowledge, how we can bring this knowledge from different sources to make this policy process more effective to bring biodiversity preservation and ecosystem service. How is strengthening this policy process? Well, just give you image of how people look at the policy process. You have different phases: the agenda setting, how to bring issue to agenda, up to the policy formulation, the discussions that maybe become a law, or become any kind of more formalized way to design the policy, what's called policy design part. And then we have the implementation and evaluation, and in many cases, the disseminations among like national, regional governments that could replicate what's going on in the cities, but also to other cities in the same countries or around the world. What I see is the stage of policy process. What's happened? They are surrounded by different factors, you know, and science, knowledge, power, public awareness. All these factors play a role in this policy process, in the agenda setting, policy formulation, implementation, evaluation, dissemination. And still, there are a lot of research being done on how we actually strengthen the interface, particularly the interface of science and knowledge with the policy process, that those policy processes can be more influenced by science and knowledge. And this shape the decision making that's important in all five phases of policy process. To have the basically shaped by values, like people do that believe in certain kinds of values, but also we have a lot of interest groups that play a role in the decision making process. And information knowledge actually permeate all those. They can important to change the values. Like people have different values, think differently. I'm aware of those issues, but at the same time, they also have the shape the interest. You provide the right information and right knowledge that you can change the balance of the interest in policy making process. And this is important to how we understand the role and strengthen the role of information knowledge science in this process. At the same time, I see that this policy process is not only government. What called governance is more than government. The other actors that are important: civil society, business, also different levels of government. What called multi-level government is a process pretty much complex that in the end have the result at the local level, but a lot of times the decisions and the process that was realized to reach that result at local level depend on governance at different levels. You're going to see an example here a little bit after I present this. And the example is provide economic assessment. Some of you may know the TEB, the economics of ecosystem and biodiversity, and there is a specific TEB on cities. That's basically you try to assess the economic value of biodiversity for local and regional policymakers, and how you actually bring these economic values, this information, this knowledge to decision making, and how it can affect decisions like in the policy process as you saw before, and how it can change this policy process. For example, in the agenda setting, how to bring an issue to the agenda. If you show the value at nature, for example, or the river that's being polluted, and how much it's going to cost to clean up the river, just to give you this example, can influence the discussions and policy agenda and bring, for example, action to restore that river, for example. On the policy formulation, for the knowledge about the economic value of ecosystem providers, can actually design a policy that in the implementation part create the right incentives for those people who preserve, and the negative incentives for those people that degrade the environment. And then this is the importance of economic information. And give you an example, some of you may know the Costa Rica. There's a country in Central America. They just show how improved the forest cover between 1997 and 2000, exactly because they started a process where there was a payment for ecosystem service, and looks very complicated, but basically there was a payment for those producers, agricultural producers upstream of the river, to preserve the forest. And the resources, the payment would go mainly from different sources, but one of them was fuel taxes, particularly for the cars, for the run in the cities, that these first reduce the pollution in the city, but at the same time get the resources to pay those producers upstream in the forest to conserve the forest, at the same time conserve the quantity and quality of the water that generate electricity, but also provide the service for the city dealer. And then at the same time, the producers are bringing some flow of ecosystem service to them. Well, that's it, and this is an example of what I would like to show to you in terms of ecosystem service. And with these, you have the payment that make the difference between degrading, using the forest for other use like agriculture, and use keep the forest for provision of this ecosystem service. And this payment is a very important role. Well, how to make this process happen more often? And the idea of innovation, and here innovation, just quickly, is not only the high-tech, the right side here, the patents ID, but copy, imitation, experimentation, adaptation, particularly the social innovation, new ideas, product, service, and model that simultaneously meet social needs and create new social relations for collaboration. And the idea is how you create those capabilities. And the idea of innovation is not only the technical part of innovation, the need capability, the technical capability, but the institution dimension that can multiply this technical part to bring more results in terms of how this technical part influence things on the ground. And then, well, I'm just then now I'm taking more time than expected, but the process of innovation, there is a lot of you can do in terms of learning. And finalize learning, you can learn by doing, you can learn by using certain kinds of knowledge, and also learning by interacting with different organizations. So for example, with other cities, or with, we're going to have an example, the IPBES, that is a mechanism that you learn by interacting with others. And now I'm just going to maybe stop here. You're going to have time to discuss more on the example of two cities. One is Edmonton in Canada, and the second is Curitiba. And Edmonton, I just showed to you the CV of my colleague who is presenting, that is here, sorry, showing to you, but Grant Pearsell is the Director of Parks and Biodiversity for the City of Edmonton for more than 35 years. He has experience in environmental planning engineering. He is a registered professional planner and member of the Canadian Institute of Planners. His academic background includes a Bachelor of Environment Studies degree, a Master of Arts and Regional and Resource Planning degree, as well as a diploma in Civil Engineer Technology and a certificate of urban design. Grant sits on board of directors for Edmonton and Edmonton Area Land Trust. Well, and now I'm going to pass the screen to my colleague, Grant Pearsell.
Thank you very much, Jose. It's a pleasure to be presenting today and participating in this series. Today I'm going to talk to you, my presentation is called An Integrated Landscape, Increasing Ecological Services Through a Vibrant, Multifunctional and Integrated Open Space Network in Edmonton. So what I thought it would be useful is for me to show how our city has evolved in its thinking with biodiversity planning and ecosystem services in particular over the last roughly 20-25 years. So as work comes from the academic world, it sort of gets transferred to practitioners like myself and my colleagues. Then we take it, we shape it, and we put it in the context that we are in, which is actually quite complex with very many competing goals. So I'll show you, just want to take you through three areas how we've changed our thinking to get better with ecosystem services over the years. So just a little bit of a location for those that aren't familiar with where Edmonton is. We are in northern Canada, in the settled part of Canada. We're at the top of the northern part of the Great Plains of North America. And we're in a transition zone in terms of biodiversity between the Great Plains and the boreal forest. So we have a very mixed wood kind of environment with poplar, spruce trees, grasslands, and it's pretty close to the Rocky Mountains. So just a real general piece on what the open space in Edmonton is, so to give you the idea of what we are working with. So our city corporate limits, we have about 700 square kilometers, and there, of this, there's about 11,000 hectares of open space in our inventory. And this area includes parks, natural areas, stormwater facilities, utility rights-of-way, and road medians. And it makes up about 16% of the city. And of that, there is about almost 4,000 hectares of this as natural areas, with almost 90% in our river, valley, and ravine park system. So our open space system is where much of the ecological services we enjoy are provided and protected for future generation. The developed part of Edmonton has not reached its borders yet, and about 25% of the area is still in agricultural use, but this is changing quickly. We're one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. So the total area of open space will increase, but I think the relative proportions of each category will stay roughly the same. So I'm not going to go into all the full suite of ecosystem services, but this slide just represents sort of our viewpoint on the valuable ones that we're looking at. They're really kind of weighted on the social, cultural side and economic side. We find that that's really important for our city for a lot of reasons, from you know, public health to our economy. It makes it a place where people want to move to, work, live, play, and you know, recreate. But we've never lost sight of the fact that the ecological services are pretty important to us, and that is really our life support system. So I said about 90% of the natural areas we have is in our river valley park system, and that's a big part of the network, but not the only piece. So it's we've been working on protecting the river valley and ravine system since we were incorporated in 1904. So over 4 generations have been working to assemble the land for public purposes, and now we have the largest municipally owned park in North America and perhaps beyond. But recently we have expanded this vision to include 6 other municipalities to extend this further and protect the river valley. So these are really municipal efforts. This is not a provincial or federal or national project. This is comes from local people and local money. So our city has grown to over 800,000 citizens in a metropolitan area of 1.3 million, 1.3 million people. And so as we grew, the residential housing was further and further from this park system. So in 1993, we started to develop new approaches to conserve natural land and the ecological services they provide on what we call the tablelands, the land above the river valley and ravines. So the rest of my talk will focus on our evolution and thinking. So from singularity to integration. This is, I'm going to take you through a few steps, 3 sort of key pieces we've evolved in our thinking as we've absorbed academic information and as times have changed on how we should treat our natural areas. So we moved from a singular approach with a focus on acquiring individual open spaces as the opportunity arose to a far more integrated multifunctional open space system. So this shows one of our first conserved natural areas called Dunluce Natural Area. It's a natural area surrounded by residential development with limited connectivity beyond. We were conserving single sites with limited or no connectivity, and that's how we started our conservation activities, and it seemed to be consistent with what was good practice at the time for cities. So the thinking behind conserving single sites was current, as I said, but the approach was taught in schools in the late 1980s and 1990s, and the goal of this type of planning was to identify and protect environmentally sensitive areas. Connectivity, a larger system, was being contemplated, but there were serious doubts in the academic community about whether this was appropriate. So as we started to do our conservation activities, this was part of the public discourse. Should we connect? Should we not? There was quite a bit of confusion about whether that was appropriate or not. So this approach resulted in a number of isolated natural areas on the urban landscape that actually have survived quite well. However, animal diversity is quite low. The level of organization and interaction was interdisciplinary in nature, and discourse was limited mainly to biologists and some environmental planners. That being, you would find an area, you'd say this is worthwhile protecting, and you would have very little conversations with other professionals. There were separate policy frameworks for parks, natural areas, stormwater management, urban forests. Integration was not part of the conversation. As a result, the ecosystem services considered were largely habitat related, and often there was a strong debate about whether people should be allowed near these areas. Perhaps they should be fenced. We still encounter this thinking today, but not very often. So then we started to move to connectivity around 2007. So instead of looking at just one single natural area, we started to find out how could we connect across neighborhoods. So we developed connected systems of parks, natural areas, wetlands, school sites across multiple neighborhoods. And this slide shows, illustrates what we first planned and are currently developing. It's about 3.5 kilometers across the system and covers 5 neighborhoods. And in order to do this, it was quite complex and it required negotiations with many different open space professionals, engineers, urban planners, ecologists, school planners to make this idea a reality. This was a step in the right direction, but the relationship between open spaces was still one of adjacency rather than affinity. So we were able to butt natural areas one against the other, but we were not really talking about ecosystem services as a whole system and how it all relate, how the whole system properties could be enhanced. So the thinking behind the connected open space system was an approach that was now firmly established in academic thinking and landscape ecology was becoming mainstream. And the goal of this type of planning was to try and get larger ecological benefits in our neighborhoods. One of the big drivers was the scarcity of public land that was available, and our seeking a way to get more benefits out of this resource. The initial model was quickly adopted by others in the community, and applications for similar networks became the norm. Large development companies liked this approach because the market was responding well. People liked living near this type of park systems. Although there were still separate policy frameworks, the level of organizational interaction was multidisciplinary in nature and involved a number of disciplines. However, individual owners responsible for the elements in the network, the individual pieces like parks and school sites and natural areas, focused on a limited number of ecological services for the respective elements. Nevertheless, we were making progress. We were creating connected multifunctional networks with a broader suite of ecosystem services. But behind the scenes, there was a constant battle between ecological and recreational planners over which set of ecological services would dominate, ecological or social cultural services. Is it possible to have both? So one of the key issues we had to solve in Edmonton was how to connect the various ecological network segments so that we could realize the true power of the ecological network model inspired by our river valley and ravine system. So the piece I showed you, the limits were arterial roadways on each end, and how are we going to get across those? So our innovation in Edmonton was the creation of wildlife passage engineering design guidelines. This was a tool that allowed our engineers, land use planners, and ecological planners to work together efficiently and constructively to separate wildlife and vehicle movements. When we ran into trying to solve this issue before, we really didn't have the language, we didn't have the tool, we didn't really know how to work together, and this tool really solved this. Once we put the tool out there, it really started to take off. And today we have 27 purpose-built design wildlife passages and more on the way. But that I'll leave that for another type of presentation. So now moving on to the third way of looking at it, integration, multifunctional site planning and design. In 2015, we took a step towards integration with open space sites, multifunctional sites that provide many more services, and also integration of the open space network as a whole with other urban systems. This is the problem that we are working on today. And this rendering is something that we're building in our city. We wanted to build a really sustainable community, and we've had an old airport land, and we're building a lot of sustainability features into the city, and this is the park system that we're building on an old contaminated site. So we feel that true integration requires transdisciplinary thinking, creating a unity of intellectual frameworks beyond the disciplinary perspectives. And this requires a focus on required and evolving functions of the site network that drives planning and design. While landscape scale is in focus, deeper planning is also taking place at the site level, resulting in sites that are truly multifunctional. We are planning at the landscape scale and implementing at the site scale. We are finding our inspiration from new academic thinking in landscape and ecological urbanism, and emerging this with landscape science, something new for our engineers and planners. We've just started on a plan with an integrated open space policy framework, and we are confident that a landscape approach combined with a multifunctional focus will deliver greater ecosystem services at the site level and the landscape or system level. This I'm not going to go into in any detail, but we do have, this is something that's just been approved in one of our plans, and it's about 8 kilometers by 8 kilometers in area, and it's an area for 110,000 new residents, and we work collaboratively with all of our various disciplines to make this a reality. It still has a way to go and a lot of complexity. So all of this kind of thinking we're going to contain in our new open space master plan, and at the core of it is going to be thinking around ecological urbanism. And I have this quote from Michael van Valkenburg, ecological urbanism seeks innovation with the interaction of urban systems identifies opportunities and infrastructures, and sees landscape as much as an organizing force as it sees it as a distinct facet of the city. So in summary, we moved from singularity, where the outcome was limited cross-department collaboration, resulted in open spaces that are isolated and often programmed for specific functions, resulting in low ecological services. We then moved into connectivity, where the cross-departmental collaboration results in a connected network of open space across neighborhoods and districts, while open spaces are still often programmed for a sole function and thus provide limited ecological services. Connectivity results in multifunctional networks and more ecological services represented across the network. And finally, we're moving towards a deeper cross-departmental collaboration in planning, design, and implementation results in multifunctional sites that are connected across the city and effectively integrated into the urban fabric. Diverse ecosystem services are supported both within a site and across the entire open system. So this is where we're going, and we've got a good start on this, and we're excited to complete this work. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Grant, I think that was a very good example for a city that's trying to innovate and bring knowledge to the policy process, and how this knowledge actually has shown that very interesting results in terms of how you do and why you do, and also strengthen the capacity of the city to do more with less. And now, before you go into the questions, you have the second presenter. That's my pleasure to have Tatiana Gadda. She's an associate professor at the Federal University of Technology of Parana in Curitiba, Brazil, where she coordinates the project, the Studio on City and Biodiversity. Her research interests concentrate broadly in the appropriation of natural resources by cities and urban consumption patterns in cities of different income levels. She has a PhD from Japan in Earth Urban Environmental Science, also a Master of Science in Spatial Planning from the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, and a degree in Architecture from the Federal University of Parana, Catholic University of Parana. She worked in the United Nations University for her present job, and also she has done a lot of work as practitioner in Brazil and elsewhere. In Sweden, before doing her master, she worked as an architect in city planning office of the city of Gothenburg. In Parana, she coordinates the Europe Committee of Regional Center of Expertise, and also she's a member of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service, the IPBES. And Tatiana, we talked today and asked her to present a little bit what the work of the IPBES. Some of you may know there's a kind of new IPCC for biodiversity, but also she'll present some of her experience in Curitiba. Well, now I'll pass the voice to Tatiana.
Thank you very much, José. Thank you all for being with me today. I'm going to talk a little bit about my work with IPBES, or the IPBES work specifically, and then I move to biodiversity and ecosystem service conservation efforts in the city of Curitiba in Brazil. So I'm now actually in a meeting in Campinas, where it's a meeting on the IPBES effort for Brazil. And 23 years ago in Rio, so we had these two conventions, the climate change and the Convention on Biological Diversity. From the Climate Change Convention, we advanced in terms of having intergovernmental panel on climate change from 1988, which has one function, which is basically undertaking assessments. And very recently, we also got another intergovernmental panel, which is on biodiversity and ecosystem services. And this one from 2012 so has 4 functions. So not only undertake assessments, but also support knowledge generation, capacity building, and policy support tools. So the scope of IPBES assessments will be broader than the one of IPCC. And it will deliver assessments, as said, but it also responds to the importance of managing biodiversity and ecosystem services at more local scales. In this case, the local scales here are basically meant to be nations, and not as usually we from planning understand a local scale. So in addition, IPBES will have a stronger work program on capacity building than the IPCC currently does. Right, so the IPBES, as said, was formally established in 2012, and the aim is to be a policy interface for biodiversity and ecosystem services for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. It has unique features. So one of it is, as said, the capacity building, and there may be things that IPBES is not now thinking of doing that may be done in the future. So as said, IPBES has no mandate at the subnational level, but at the same time is committed to bring to the process indigenous and local knowledge. And the capacity building task force of IPBES also collects requests from the parties, from nations, which in the future could lead to capacity building on the subnational scale. But why biodiversity and ecosystem services are needed at the local, or need local action? And I think José has already mentioned many reasons for that. So I think I will just jump this slide. But basically, of course, we depend on biodiversity and ecosystem services in our cities. And here, this slide just is here to show you the role that Curitiba, my hometown, played in the roadmap of biodiversity. So it actually began all this effort on having cities engaged in the discussion of biodiversity and ecosystem service conservation at more higher levels. At the COP8 in 2006 in Curitiba. And the next year, Curitiba organized a meeting on cities and biodiversity, and from that, the result was the Declaration on Cities and Biodiversity. And then again in 2010, after Bonn in 2008, Curitiba had a second meeting on cities and biodiversity. So I just want to bring this to your attention, that Curitiba somehow played an important role at the beginning, because it is in our DNA somehow this connection between ecosystem services and biodiversity. And here is a map of Parana state, where Curitiba is the capital. So Curitiba is situated in Parana state, and this map shows you a great rate of deforestation already in the 1990s. And the trees you see below are called Parana pines, and they are very important as they are actually a symbol of our state and also of the city. We had a very accelerated deforestation for the reason of selling timber. And currently, we have only 0.8% of our original forests. And also, obviously, the species, the Parana pine, is critically endangered already. So, and I think it's also very interesting to think that Curitiba, its name, it comes from the abundance of Parana pines. So it is, in an indigenous language, means lots of pine fruits. And this is quite ironically now. But we have the same thing happening with the name of the country, which is Brazil, and it's named after another tree, commonly known in Brazil as pau-brasil, which is now severely threatened. So we got this picture, which is not so good. But at the same time, when we go into the city of Curitiba, there is a very strong image attached to the city together with green areas, and also the success of Curitiba in urban planning. Curitiba is very unknown to be a city, very recognized to be a city which is the cradle of the BRT, and which also could pioneer the planning based on 3 pillars, which are the road system and transportation system and land use. And it has also one of the most solid green agendas in the country. And it has almost 2 million people. Almost 2 million people, and the city has areas of forests in good state still, which covers 20% of the city. This is a very high rate of urban green area among Brazilian cities. Curitiba presents about 64 square meters of green area per inhabitant, and obviously the parks that Curitiba is also very famous for were created to have many different functions. They were created, as Grant previously showed, in an isolated manner first, or fragmented, but there is an effort now to get them more connected. The main reasons to create the parks were to provide a river overflow location where the parks are in wetlands, leisure, of course, and indirectly to minimize illegal occupation, which is a problem that we have in Brazil. And we would do that we would do that by the appropriation of parks by the citizens. So the map shows you many of these parks along rivers. So we have many rivers, and we have at the bottom the Iguaçu, the Great Iguaçu River that gives origin to the Iguaçu, the famous Iguaçu waterfalls. Sorry, I just cannot change my slide. I don't know why. What happened here? I don't know. Maybe now. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I cannot change my slide. Okay, so also here you have another picture showing you many green areas in the north of the city of Curitiba, and I thought this picture was a good one to show you some of the parks, which is very difficult to recognize the borders. Because in fact that's the main idea. the parks are, in some areas, very linked to private areas. So what the city of Curitiba found out is that of all the green area we have in Curitiba, 75% are in private land and 25% in public land, some of which are parks. So meaning that we really need the people to engage in biodiversity and ecosystem services conservation in the city, to buy the idea of having these areas preserved and connected. And for that, we have a tool which is called the Reserves of Municipal Natural Heritage, which gives some incentives, some financial incentive to private owners of land, so that we can protect these areas and hopefully integrate areas as well. And this other map here shows you one river basin, which is the Barigui River Basin in the west of the city of Curitiba. And you can see the small circles there where the parks are. So there are several parks just in or along this river within the borders of Curitiba. Very recently, there is also a very last park. If you go to the bottom of the map, you see what's called the Reserva do Bugio, which is actually a different park, and it integrates 3 municipalities, Curitiba and 2 more in this reserve. And it's a reserve for biodiversity, and is integrated in that way. So the urban parks were conceived with different environmental restoration goals in Curitiba, and they encompass a wildlife refuge and biodiversity reservoir in the middle of the urban surroundings. The Barigui River Park project seeks to establish a biodiversity corridor by creating parks along the Barigui River, integrating 7 parks and 1 wildlife reserve, as I said. And there is something very interesting in this water basin, which is a species, the largest rodent, living rodent in the world, which is called capybara. And it's spread all over South America, and is a very good colonizer of urban environments. You have capybaras in urban parks in São Paulo, and you have capybaras in the urban parks, and especially in these parks of the Barigui River Basin in Curitiba. The first record of a capybara in the parks of Curitiba were only from 2003. So nobody really knows from where they came from, or it was not an initiative from the municipality to place them there, to introduce them to the parks, but it happened this way. And what the effect of this is that it's a very dear symbol of Curitiba nowadays, and became the city mascot. So you can see here a picture of Curitiba connecting itself with capybara, and there are many products that has the image of capybaras now to sell, and you have also the image of Parque Barigui, which is the same name of the river, and you see how they are organized in groups, and they are very nice to see with their cubs and all. And it appears that the population of the capybaras has been expanding and spreading also throughout these parks interconnected by rivers. So it raises some questions as, is the quality of the environment in the parks improving? Is that why we are having now capybaras there? Or are they now, these parks are perfect locations for wildlife and we should expect even other wildlife examples there? So capybaras inhabit places that offer minimal requirements in terms of the presence of water, areas for grazing, and canopy cover areas aiming for shelter. And it also becomes then a very interesting case study to see the relation between environmental quality, the development of the city parks, and also biodiversity. And but these we have to understand a little bit about the capybara's behavior. So they include the staple pairs, harems, or groups consisting of males, one dominant and two subordinate males, several females, and also cubs. And you see a capybara lost in the middle of the city in the picture below. And this capybara appeared in the terminal, the roads, the bus terminal of the city. Probably this capybara had a fight within its group and had to search for another group. And it's not the only case. Has been many cases reported where capybaras are around the city, walking around and probably looking for another group. So we need to be careful. They are really large animals. And as they have semi-aquatic habits, they of course prefers to live in humid areas, and it's also the food. Its food proceeds from terrestrial and aquatic vegetation. So yeah, water is crucial for them. And amongst native species, it's the one that has one of the most tolerant. It's most tolerant to environmental change. And also has great movability, so which of course can also act as a disseminator of various diseases, for example, the Rocky Mountain spotted fever or liver fluk.
Okay, Tatiana, thank you very much. You are now moving to the questions. Okay. Here is José again. Thank you. You had a very good examples of two cities that innovate in this area. They bring in ecosystem service and biodiversity together in the policy process in the city. That's an important part of the city. You have a question to Grant. This is a question regarding public participation in Edmonton, and I would like you to maybe answer quickly to how much extent there was public participation in the different initiatives in Edmonton. Grant, it's up to you. Grant?
Always sort of having some self-criticism that we have to do it better. We're always looking for new techniques. So we do it in a variety of ways, and it's just part of the way we do business.
Could you repeat, please? Because I think was cut off for a little bit. The question is about public participation.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, the public participation is the way we do business in Edmonton. It's from the city to citizens and citizens to the city, but also with various groups with specific interests, from the development industry to environmental groups. We build this into everything we do, and we're always constantly checking to make sure that we've got it right. We have advisory committees, we do surveys, we have public meetings, we have a whole host of things we do. And in fact, it's encoded in city policy that we must do so. And we also have an office of public involvement that's dedicated specifically to make sure that we keep making our practices, updating them, making them better and better.
Okay. Thank you, Grant. You have another question from Catherine Monk. And one other question about participation. The other one is about regulations. To what extent did you have to develop new legislation or regulation to push this approach? Both in, there's a question for Grant and a question for Tatiana. Maybe you start, Grant, that you already
Certainly.
have.
So we have a culture that's pretty averse to regulation. People just generally do not like regulation, but we do have a lot of policy, and that's where the urban, so that's where the public participation and involvement comes in, where we work with to develop policy, and I think if we get the policy right, there's a general agreement in our community to do that. We also have the city council that, you know, in our system, everybody gets when decision making is happening at city council, everybody gets 5 minutes to tell what their point of view is. What's kind of interesting, I think, in Alberta, which is our province that we're part of, is they provide enabling legislation to the municipalities in this regard, particularly in the environmental side, is that we are permitted to do certain things, but we are not told what to do. So if you look at our sister city of roughly the same size, Calgary to the south, we both have pretty big programs in biodiversity, but the expression is different, and the expression is a result of, I think, some of the priorities of the city and the culture that we're kind of embedded in.
Okay. I have another question here, and then later on I'll pass the two questions to Tatiana, but the question from Artur Getz Escudero, he asked about integration of agriculture in land use, and the case of both Curitiba and Edmonton, and how much you have agriculture has also been using to provide ecosystem service. Can you answer, Grant? And then I'll pass the questions to Tatiana.
So we have some particularly productive agricultural land in the north part of our city, where our market gardens are, and this has been part of a really big public debate in our last municipal development plan and in our agriculture and food strategy that was just recently approved. And it was a really big deal. There was a lot of different points of view that had to be considered. It took us 3 days to get through these various, as I said, 5-minute presentations from all the citizens. And it took us a while to sort out sort of a balance for that. We're also have just passed some new zoning rules that allow urban agriculture in areas that we've never had before, so that's kind of an emergent issue. It's how do we accommodate urban agriculture into our city fabric. I hope that helps.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Grant. Now, Tatiana, maybe you could just these couple of questions. What kind of legislation, regulations you use in Curitiba to push this approach, and what is the role of agriculture in this policy of providing ecosystem service? Tatiana, it's up to you.
Okay, I heard that is something related to agricultural. Can you repeat, Jose, please?
Yeah, one is about the legislation, what kind of legislation, so if they were necessary to push those policies in Curitiba. And the second question is what role plays agriculture also in providing ecosystem service?
Okay, so in the case of legislation, we have obviously legislation plays a very important role in organizing territory, and we are now actually revising our master plan. So we don't know very well yet what will be the result and how these will reflect on biodiversity and ecosystem services conservation in the city, but obviously this is one of the key things. And I think there are many also different ways to go, like the park that I mentioned that was created in the very south of Curitiba and encompasses 3 municipalities. So there may be also new ways to go, as in the case of this park, so that we can integrate municipalities for regional ecosystem services that are needed. But this is not generally the case. In the case of agriculture, I think it goes in the same on the same line of thinking. And we don't have within Curitiba any agricultural land, at least officially. Of course, people can have some plants and vegetables and all, and there has been some incentive even to have urban agriculture in the city, but the city is totally urban by law. And this may represent also a little challenge, because in the past, when Curitiba had both rural and urban areas, it was possible to have bigger plots where the habits were different. Also, people could close the cycle of foods, just maybe needing less waste dumps and these kind of things. So the role of agriculture is also very important as a buffer to the Atlantic forests. So there are definitely many roles for the agriculture.
Okay, thank you, Tatiana. We have, for sake of time, we maybe not be able to answer all the questions, and you could email the presenters directly. But one question now, to the last question to Edmonton, to Grant, which is the link between green infrastructure and social equality just cities? And the question also asks if Edmonton has any serious problem of social integration, and maybe how those are linked.
I think I need a little bit.
Question linked to green infrastructure is how much remains in the city council and how much goes to community NGOs to maintain.
Sorry, I'm not understanding the question. Could you just rephrase it a little bit?
Yeah, one question is the link between this green infrastructure and social equality in the city. This, if actually, how do you see the link between these two, like equality in the city in green infrastructure? And the second question, the first question is from Jon Barcena. The second question is about the management of the green infrastructure. Is how much the city council keeps it, and how much is goes to communities and NGOs?
To community which? The last part?
NGOs, non-governmental organizations.
Oh, I see. Yes. So all of our parks and open space is open to the public. It's free. There is no charge. Access has many points throughout the city, and it's distributed sort of everywhere. And I think that also the management of our green infrastructure is a challenge always. However, it is done solely by the city. Okay.
And how about the links with the equality and justice that you see? Is this free access, no?
It is free access. There is no charge to go into any of our parks. Occasionally there might be an event that somebody is putting on or a group is putting on that might have a charge, like a festival of some type that helps to recover those costs. And there might be a rental fee from the city on some of them that people have to pay. But if you're just a regular citizen going into our parks and open space, natural areas, and so on, it is free access.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now you are going to the end of the webinar. Just make a few points before you close. Just this idea of how the cities are innovated, and you see that pretty much this innovation is place-based. Each city follows its own path in terms of innovating. Other factors, the economics is important to provide knowledge to shape the policy process, but not only factor, culture is also important. And individuals in organizations beyond the government also important to innovate and bring those public benefits both to ecosystems locally but also globally. And the interesting thing that you saw here is how these innovations expanded. Both in case of Edmonton and Curitiba, they start integrating the municipalities around in some of those initiatives, because they think, and this is quite important also, that what's happened just outside the city, also been done in the right way. If not, it's going to have negative impact on what you're doing in the city. And finally, you have to think more kind of public policy can nurture these kinds of innovations, both at city level, that innovations that happens at local level, but as well as a much higher level of the thing, how national government can promote and provide incentives to subnational governments to innovate in different aspects of biodiversity and ecosystem service. Well, and then closing the webinar, I just like to thank all the participants. We had here two different examples of innovative cities, and I hope that the attendees had a good idea on what those cities are doing and why they are doing. I see still a few questions. If you're interested, just email Urbis, email ICLEI, and then maybe they forward the questions to the presenters, and they could answer this by email. Thank you all, and I hope to see you in the next webinar.